Welcome, everyone. My name is Andrea Webster. I work with IU's Environmental Resilience Institute, and we are so happy today to bring you a webinar focused on the connections between racial equity and climate change. So all webinar attendees are muted at the moment, so please enter your questions into the chat function throughout today's presentations, and we will answer them at the end. As always, we will be recording today's webinar. I'll share a link to that recording along with some follow-up resources, probably by Monday or Tuesday next week. And I hope you'll share them with your colleagues. And I think this is going to be a fabulous presentation. So I think you might even want to rewatch it when it's all done. So next, I'll pass it over to Janet McCabe, who will serve as our webinar moderator today. Janet is the director of the Environmental Resilience Institute. Janet?
All right, thank you so much, Andrea, and thanks to everybody for joining us today for this important topic. It really is an important topic. As most of us are aware, racial equity and environmental issues overlap in many ways. Climate change is no exception, and we're thinking a lot at the Environmental Resilience Institute about the connections between social equity, racial equity, and environmental equity. So today, I'm especially excited to have these two amazing, and I'll even say marvelous speakers, which is a good word to use with one of our speakers especially, Dr. Marva King and Brenda Scott Henry. These talented women will really provide a grounding for us in the historical context of environmental justice, but also broaden that out and then bring it home with a local perspective from Gary, Indiana. So we're going to have great presentations here, and hopefully we'll have time for your questions. Our speakers do have a hard stop at 1, so we won't be able to roll over today, but we'll make sure that all your questions get answered. We'll also afterwards, as we always do, and thanks to Andrea for always having attention to this, send a follow-up email to everybody with a link to the recording and with other resources that we think people might find useful. I don't know about you, but feel like I'm sort of overwhelmed with resources on social and environmental justice right now, and sometimes it's hard to know which ones to pick to really focus on because you just can't read them all. So I'd like to start today's presentation by acknowledging and honoring the indigenous communities native to our region of Southern Indiana, and recognize that Indiana University at Bloomington is built on indigenous homelands and resources. So we recognize the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people as past, present, and future caretakers of this land, and are so very grateful to them. Today's webinar is hosted by the Environmental Resilience Institute. I recognize many of the names on the participant list, but some of you may be new. We have many resources that are available to local governments and the general public about environmental resilience and climate change. So we would certainly draw your attention to those. One that I will highlight, and that Andrea has helpfully highlighted here, is the Environmental Resilience Toolkit. It's an online resource center that hosts just tons of information to help Midwesterners prepare for climate change and be resilient in the face of the environmental changes that are happening. All the resources are free and available to everybody. Local governments especially can use a special tailor your search function. Well, anybody can use it, but we designed it with local governments in mind to create a tailored package of climate change, environmental resilience resources just for them on topics that they're particularly interested in, with information about funding opportunities, training opportunities, case studies from similar communities in the Midwest that have implemented projects. We don't want you to have to reinvent any single wheel that somebody else has already invented here in the Midwest. So please check that out and any of these other resources as well. I want to thank our partner organizations, Accelerate Indiana Municipalities, the Association of Indiana Counties, Health by Design, and the Indiana Public Health Association, who have been longtime sponsors and supporters of this webinar and help us get the word out and bring this information to you. So many thanks to them. We had lots and lots of people register for the webinar today. And fortunately, many of you actually have come. It's a necessary fact, or an inevitable fact of all our Zoom lives, that people register for more things that they can come to. But we enjoy very robust audiences here at our webinar series. So thank you for joining us. And please, if you find this useful, please spread the word. I wanted to mention one other particular thing. You'll find information about this on ERIT, but something called the Sustainable Development Code, which is just an amazing resource that's being developed through a project run by Drake Law School, involves many academic institutions. It is just the most comprehensive set of resources on different sustainability topics that would be of interest to local governments, with good, better, and best examples of different approaches that have been used by just hundreds of communities. And you can see their topics here. I really can't commend it enough as a good place to start for information if you're looking to do these sorts of things in your community. So let me go now to introducing our speakers. As always, I'll introduce them and pass it off to Marva King first, and then she'll pass it off to Brenda Scott Henry, and then we'll hold questions to the end unless Andrea or I see something that just absolutely needs to be clarified in the moment. So Dr. Marva King is first and foremost, I have to tell you, a friend and former colleague of mine, one of the favorite people that I worked with at EPA when I was there. But without doubt, she is a leading expert on and contributor to efforts to promote environmental justice in America. In 2017, she retired after a long career at EPA, serving in various positions, including advisor to the Assistant Associate Administrator for Environmental Justice and Community Revitalization. EPA specializes in long titles for people's jobs. She was EJ Coordinator in the Office of Air and Radiation, where I primarily knew her, Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of EJ, co-chair of the Community Action for a Renewed Environment program, which is a wonderful program, doesn't exist anymore, but helped several communities in Indiana deal with environmental issues. And she was program manager for the National Environmental EJ Council. From 2018 to 2020, she served on a George Mason Health and Climate Solutions team, which was supporting community work for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. She holds an MPA from the University of Delaware and a PhD in public policy from George Mason University. And I think I was there actually the day that you heard you'd gotten your PhD, Dr. King, and I remember how excited we all were for you. Our second speaker is a more local personal hero of mine, Brenda Scott Henry. She is the Director of Environmental Affairs for the City of Gary. She has over 15 years of experience in environmental programs and services. She serves as the Stormwater MS4 Coordinator and is primarily responsible for the planning and implementation of the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System Permitted Program. She is the person to go to in Gary for environmental and sustainability issues, and just has amazing energy to keep that city moving forward. Very collaborative approach, working across city departments, has worked with multiple mayors, and we're very, very lucky to have her in Gary and in Indiana. So I'm going to turn it over to Marva, and then she will turn it over to Brenda.
All righty. Hey, hello everybody. So next slide, please, Andrea. So you know I'm an EPA retiree, and so I was asked to talk to you about EJ and climate change. I threw public health in there because it's so much a part of it, and I also threw in the recent role of Congress in there because there's so much going on right now in Congress on EJ. Next slide, please. I wanted to actually, I know some of you know about EJ, but I just wanted to actually give a quick 2-slide overview and then talk to you about how I feel, how I approached EJ when I first got involved with it. And I did it in my 30s. I wasn't right out of college or anything like that. I just did a mid-career change and got into environmental justice and went to work at the EPA. So as you know, environmental justice has been around forever. I love the fact that Janet talked about the Native Americans in first thing, and and they were a big part of EJ when it wasn't even right. People weren't even writing about it or thinking about it. So it goes back a long way. But when it became a national movement, it was in 1982. And this picture shows DC delegate Walter Fauntleroy walking in North Carolina. They did the violent sit-in protest against PCB's landfill in Warren County. Next slide, please. This is just a list, and how I always like to talk about EJ is, like I said, a little bit of the history. And sometimes people forget this history, and that's why I put the main points up, how we graduated to where we are now. And I said 82, Warren County, 83, US Government Accounting Report, 87, UCC's Commission for Racial Justice National Study. They actually did a 20-year retroflect a little while ago. The 1992 National Law Journal. And the 1992, as I've told many a student, is the law journal that really caught my heart. It really made me think about EJ, because I was actually getting my master's degree at University of Delaware at the time, and I was writing I discovered EJ in a book we were reviewing, a policy book, environmental policy book. And I was in the Delaware Law Library in the archives room researching it. And it was on a hot summer day. Any of you who went to school part-time while you worked full-time like I did, your weekends were full of school. And I'm sitting there looking at these long depictions of pictures of people suffering all over the country on EJ, from Appalachia to Native American to inner city to the rural areas, and I'm crying my heart out. And I went home that day, called my mother and told her I found what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then I went and found a job at EPA. Next slide, please. So I worked in a lot of things at EPA, but I was one of the first employees in the Office of Environmental Justice. I was there when the first director, Dr. Clarice Gaylord, set up the program, the EJ program at EPA, that is still set up the same way today. She put EJ coordinators in each of the regions and each headquarters office. She established a National Environmental Justice Advisory Council to make sure that the EPA administrator had direct advice from multi-stakeholders on this issue. I was there when we helped implement Clinton's 94 executive order on EJ. And it's, every administrator since then has approved it for it to continue on. But the main point that I love about that executive order is that it established an interagency working group with all the federal agencies, and they do a tremendous lot of work. Next slide, please. Those of you who don't know, these are some pictures right out of grants, pictures, or places I've been throughout the years, and it just gives you a face of what environmental injustice looks like. It just, from Appalachia to Native American to cumulative impacts to urban environment. But most important, I think, is, believe it or not, is, well, they're all important, but most important is to make sure people figure out what's going on in their community, and they participate in the decision-making and partnership work that's going on in their community to make their community better. So it helps build that social capital of their community, and that's what we did at EPA. One of our main things was helping to build that social capital in communities in danger so that they can understand and help, solve their own problems. Next up slide, please. When I talk to people, I want to know, especially people who may not know about EJ that much, I always think about how I learned about it and what were the things that I read that made sure that I knew what I was talking about. And these are some of those books and articles that were important to me as I was growing myself as a middle-aged adult in the EJ world. Because if you don't know what you don't know, you got to read about it. You got to study about it. You got to talk about it. And that's what I did. My next slide, please, Andrea. And so my last two slides for you are basically links. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them. But when I think about EJ and climate, and the reason why I have, and I see, yeah, Andrea will share these slides later, because I want you to have the links. Because a lot of people, especially with the Black Lives Matter protests, the nonviolent protests that they are engaged in right now, a lot of people don't understand or they don't quite get it why people are so angry. So I like to just give you some facts that will help you. So those first two links do that. The first one is the history of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Midwest, and what happened there. I think they even got a movie out about it now. And there's a whole lot of history, but a lot of times, if you're like me, you want to be able to point to something. And that points to what happened in Tulsa. Had that whole community, the Black community, was destroyed. It's only one Black community that we have a record of, but there were many. And that stuff grows and is talked about in my family and other Black families. And we know about this stuff. Maybe you may not know about it, but we do. And it hurts us to this day. People may not know what systematic racism is. So I got a USA Today article there for you. And all these articles are current within the last 3 to 4 months. So these are just things that you can look at later, but they're important that for me to share these with you so you will understand that this is just not out of somebody's pain or heart. There are factual research articles on, for example, from Columbia University, why climate change is an EJ issue. For example, from Harvard Medical School, why extreme heat is an issue in urban communities. I think you have the Center for Earth, Energy, and Democracy is the executive director is Dr. Cecilia Martinez. If you don't know her, she's out of Minneapolis. I would suggest you click on, I got her website right there. Click on her website and learn about what she's doing, because, you know, she has a clean power plan training it's on her website that if you, and of course, this administration has not got the clean power plan, but I remember working on it with Janet, and I think it was the best thing we ever did, because what we did, and Janet was adamant about this, was that she did not want to get it wrong. She wanted to get it right. So we had multiple stakeholders from every walk of life talking about this and trying to help EPA figure out how to formulate this plan. So we had industry, we had environmental groups, we had EJ community groups, we had state and local government. We all came together, and I think it was a fabulous clean power plan. And I just read an article the other day that said what happened to it, and you can imagine. I don't have to talk about it. The other one, the last slide there, is a link to the NAACP page on environmental justice. And the reason why I put that there is because that that particular group in the NAACP is doing wonderful stuff across the nation. They're writing great things. They're doing, people always want to know about definitions. They have great definitions. So it's something if you're a local official, you may want to look at. Even though you're not a member of the NAACP, you can learn from their website. Last slide, please. I want to talk to you about the recent role of Congress, because this is so important. I mean, in the last year, the House has done so much. They are off the charts working on environmental justice, off the charts. They have, especially the, of course, the Natural Resources Committee in the House. They are doing webinars, and I mean, they have like a webinar every other week on environmental justice or climate or poverty. And so it's something you might want to check out and go on that web page and register. It's all free and it's all educational. The other thing I want to do, and that's at the top of the first bullet there, is New Jersey governor. The New Jersey governor just signed a landmark EJ bill. And it's landmark because it's the first cumulative risk bill signed by a state. And I've been hearing rumblings that there's a whole lot of states are going to take that bill and look at it and see how that can be implemented in their own state and how they can write their own state bill. Because according to the EJ organizations and anyone who works with them, EJ is not just a lead issue. It's not just a air issue. It's a multiple diverse issue because it impacts, we live in a community that faces various ills and pollution and, you know, water, land, air. And we have to learn that we have to change from the past and learn that we have to look at all these as a cumulative impact. And New Jersey, the reason I put that there so you can read that bill, you can read what the governor says. New Jersey has done a great job. They did it with the help of their EJ organizations in that state and their, the academics from that state who work on EJ. They all came together and pulled this bill out. And I think it's one of our best things out there right now. It just happened. So that's why I wanted you to have that. The National Resources Committee from the House has actually have an EJ for Act for All bill, and that's listed there. They worked with the EJ communities to pull that off. I actually was in a meeting in the summer when they first started coming together around that bill. And I was really, actually it wasn't in the summer, it was just before COVID. So we weren't doing anywhere this summer. It was just before COVID. And I was surprised, happily surprised that Nancy Pelosi came in and gave her verbal support of it. So that's being talked about now. Of course, it hasn't been passed the Senate yet, but at least we have it passed, it passed the House. And the last bullet there, that has 3 bullets underneath of it, is about the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. I don't know if any of you belong to them, but on this call. But they have been coming out with their own EJ platform, and I wanted to give you some of those links because they are doing tremendous work now. And I don't think they were doing that other than maybe a year ago. And so that's something that you should check it out, because even though if you're not a member of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, one of your colleagues is a member, and you should see what they're doing on this. And the very last bullet there is a video. And the reason why I put that there, because you don't want to, you need a moment to talk about that, to look at that video. But the reason why I put it there, because there's a lot of Midwest legislators speaking on that video. And I think that you would probably know some of them. So it's something that you should look at in your off time, right? But you should look at, because it's important that you know what your colleagues are saying. And I'm just excited because I've had a 25-year career in environmental justice. I'm still, even though I'm not working for EPA, I still help on a local level. I still work on with people who have met throughout my life, and they still get me on Zoom calls, or they have me come to their classes before COVID and speak. And I think that it's important that for me in my field, that's what my PhD is in, that I stay active. I just had a call this morning from a guy from Tufts who wants me to be part of their platform they're doing up there. So I stay active. That's how I stay active. And I love this. This is, somebody told me a long time ago, EJ is not a job, it's a way of life. I made it my way of life, and it'll be my way of life until I'm gone. And I want to end this presentation with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So it's actually in the book of Matthew in the Bible, but he put it in this way. The rich nations must use their vast resources of wealth to develop the underdeveloped, school the unschooled, and feed the unfed. Ultimately, a great nation is a compassionate nation. No individual or nation can be great if it does not have a concern for the least of us. He said that in his Nobel Peace Prize speech. And I think it was 84. So anyway, that's it for me. Passing it to you, Brenda.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Keene. It's a pleasure to be on panel with you. So I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. So I also want to thank Dr. McCabe and Andrea Webster for organizing or hosting this webinar, because racial inequalities is a very needed conversation, as a conversation that needs to be had with a lot of people who, you know, maybe a little bit don't know how to move forward with the conversation, actually. So Dr. King, we will be tapping into you to help work with some of our nonprofit organizations who are moving, are having these discussions around environmental issues. So we'll be glad to have you as a guest. So the city of Gary, so the other thing is, thank you for sharing a lot of resources that are available so that we don't have to go out and look for those things. We know someone who to come to, or we can just look at some of the links that you shared in your presentation so that we can be better educated and do better services in terms of addressing climate change. So the city of Gary has been fortunate to work with US EPA and some other organizations, particularly in moving sustainable development planning and practices forward in the city of Gary. And we'll talk about some of those things in my presentation. So first of all, let me share my screen with you so that you can see my presentation. Excuse me. Oh, right here. Okay. Can you see my screen yet?
Not yet.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh,
Let's pull it up here. Okay. So today I'll talk to you a little bit about how the city of Gary has been using, doing some capacity building, climate resilient activity in the city for a while now. So my topic discussions will include climate stressors. So I'll identify some of those stressors that we have in air, land, and water quality. We'll talk about some of the programs that we've used to incorporate community engagement is at the forefront of what we do. And then I will talk about, lastly, our climate resilience and recovery planning process and how the public can be involved in that, and how we are recruiting right now for people to be a part of the our work groups. And this is through our program with the Indiana University ERI, and developing a climate action plan for the city of Gary. All right, so I want to stay on text. All right. The city of Gary, for those of you who may not know, is located on the shores of Lake Michigan. We are the most southern tip of Lake Michigan, but we are not, we have a population of less than 80,000 people, probably about 70,000 people right about now, about 50 square miles. So that's a pretty large area that we have to maintain as public leaders or public officials. There are about 12 neighborhoods that are covered, and you can see those highlighted here. But the most important part, one of the most important assets that we have is our natural environment. So we're located on Lake Michigan. We have two major rivers, the Little Calumet River and the Grand Calumet River, which are headwaters for Lake Michigan. And then we have lots of conservation and preservation areas that are located within our boundaries. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But we have over 50 parks that are in our community. And as we've begun to, starting in the previous administration, we did a lot of community planning, and we were fortunate enough to have a EPA, the Department of Transportation, and Community Development who, or HUD, who worked with the city of Gary to do some of this work. And then later on, we had a designation of a strong city, strong communities from the White House. So we had a staff of federal employees who were housed at City Hall to help us work through some of the many challenges that we have as a community in terms of advancing the city and moving forward. We were excited to have those resources available in our city. That ended up with us coming up with several neighborhood plans. And at the forefront was community engagement. Everything that we did in terms of neighborhood planning, there were partners, alliances, there were with other organizations. But we were able to do lots of things in terms of moving our city forward. Okay. So one of the first stressors that I will talk about, and I'm having a problem maneuvering this, is air quality. So within our department, we have, we were established by ordinance to do air and land quality activities for the state, for the city and then the state. And so under that program, we help with some of the monitoring and enforcement. So we work along with US EPA and the Indiana Department of Environmental Management on air quality issues. We are considered as a non-attainment area for Lake County and Porter County, Indiana, meaning that we still do some activities in order to help reduce, well, we've set some goals in order to reduce our impact on air quality. So maybe around in about, let's see, 2017, I want to say, 2016, we met with the US EPA and we were designated as a Making a Visible Difference community. So we have this alliance with EPA to do more monitoring, air quality monitoring, reporting on environmental issues that are occurring in our city. You may go to the website, there is a link to, I have to share with you on some of the monitoring locations within the city of Gary. So as you look at this map, you'll see that some of our planning, we've identified areas where we can do economic development. So like the Buffington Harbor or airport, these different lakefront district, light industrial district, these are areas where we want to focus economic development. You can see that it's also equal, it's layered on the top of this map is layered the green link. So the green link is this, and I'll talk about it a little later, this area where we have lots of green spaces that have been identified in the city, and we want to make sure that we can improve the conditions of those green spaces in order to help the earth heal itself, improve the air quality, improve land quality, and definitely address our water quality issues. We participate in a brownfields program. We have a brownfield coalition group for Northwest Indiana that Gary Hammond in Chicago work with, and then we also make sure that EPA can do the things that they need to do at the Superfund sites that are located within our city. I think there are over 20, definitely over 10 locations that are identified, but I think it's around about 23 Superfund sites that we may have in the city of Gary. Then there's wetland protection that is important to us. So we are responsible for, we help work with our other city departments in order to identify where wetlands are, and then also ensure that we are protecting those spaces from the impact of development on those spaces. Our third climate stressor I would identify is water quality. So we've worked with the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, in which they received a grant from GLESA to do a climate adaptation project. And this, from that program, we develop a tool. We call it a climate resilience infrastructure and sensitive site protocol that will help us to identify areas where we need to invest, do capital improvement projects to reduce the impact of stressors, I would say, whether it's air, land, or water, and impeding the city from moving forward. That's a tool that we've used and we will continue to use in terms of identifying how we move forward with addressing climate change. And in these two graphs, you can see that we have definitely increased number of wet days, wet weather that is happening in our community. Our water levels are increasing constantly, and our groundwater table is also in jeopardy. Just in last year, if you compare last year to this year, we've had in May 2019, that was about 8.25 inches of rainfall. If you compare to some other time, we were talking about the average rainfall for Gary in the month of May is about 3.8 inches. So you can see the significant increase of water that is happening here. So we definitely need to prepare for managing that stormwater. And we will do that through investing in our water infrastructure. Right now, our mayor, Jerome Prince, has been working with the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative and other groups similar to them. And we're advocating for Great Lake dollars in order to improve our water infrastructure. So we've completed our green infrastructure planning for the city, and we based it upon an existing plan that we have, which is the Green Link. And here again, you see the layers of, this is a 30-mile multimodal trail that we've kind of planned for, having completed the development and constructing the Green Link plan. But it is ideal, is the plan that we will use in order to connect our green spaces around the city. And on the west side over here, where you see the Brunswick neighborhood, we have a group who has been working with us, the Field Museum, the Audubon Society, the Shirley Hine Land Trust, and some more partners who have been working on this west side to identify. They've completed a quality of life assessment, and we are working with the residents to show how each of them can be good neighbors to each other. So we're saying, if you are if you are living around a preservation area where they've invested lots of resources into these spaces, how do we work together in a community? So we've asked our conservation groups to do more outreach to citizens in those areas, to educate them about the importance of the preservation areas, and then vice versa. They are teaching our residents how important it is to have an appreciation for our green spaces and how do we protect them. So there's been a lot of tree planting and native planting and tour days in which we just invite the public to come out and tour those green spaces. So community engagement is, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the tools that we use to get citizens' input into everything that we do in terms of moving the city forward. We have had the fortunate opportunity, as I mentioned before, for federal government and state government to help build the city's capacity to move the city forward. And we are passing those tools down to our citizens. So we organize, we have organized group like the, around our farming activities. So, you know, in order for you to increase access to local food, we have to make sure that the soils are good. So if you have soils, your land quality, your air quality, and water quality are crucial to farming. We work with USDA to come up with a local food, local place action plan. The citizens, we invited citizens out over a couple of days, and they actually pulled together the activities that they would like to see move forward. From that process, we've worked with Purdue University. There's the Gary Food Council has established themselves as a nonprofit organization, and we're also working with Indiana University. So we have about collectively, that was in the Legacy Foundation, I can't miss them. They're helping us with our farmers market, but these individuals collectively have secured over $700,000 to advance our urban ag activities in the city of Gary. Just recently, we started working, well, not just recently, but in the last 2 years, we worked with the Gary chapter of the NAACP, who now has resources to bring community solar into our community. Those are one of the challenges, like how do you bring renewable energies into a community where it's, you know, people are mostly focused on how they will invest home improvement dollars. So will they do the roof or will they do the inside of their home? So that you have those options that homeowners or residents will have in terms of addressing climate change or reducing our carbon footprint. And partners like them are what will help us to do this job. We can't do it independently. I don't think that government should lead those efforts, but I definitely believe that government can change policies to make it easier for community groups to get things done. We are actively involved in pollution prevention and cleanup, and this is through our stormwater program. So we started out doing programs like Love Your Block or Cities Connecting Children to Nature, and then organizing community cleanups or providing cleanup kits to groups who were block clubs who were trying to do cleanups in their neighborhoods. And we thought that this strategy will, if they achieved a small cleanup area, can you imagine what you can do if citizens come together on different issues that are going on in their community or in their particular neighborhoods and blocks? It's amazing, it's impactful. We must have citizen participation in order to move things forward. And I'm not sure how I am on time, Andrea, please let me know, but I could go on and on about this, but one of the things that we've done, and I have to give a shout out to my staff, in terms of building the capacity of our municipal employees, we had Pete Julovich, who is our air quality manager, make sure he had the certification so he can offer those services in-house. So now we are empowering citizens with our employees with skills so that they can do their job better. And we are looking to do that with more, even more as we develop plans such as our climate action planning process. I think I am way behind on my schedule, but so the final thing I want to discuss is how we are moving our climate resilience and recovery action plan forward. It took us a few years to get to this place. And I think that in involving citizens in processes, you do have to take a slower pace. You have to have a slower pace in terms of moving things forward. Yeah, we could say, oh yeah, we want to do this particular project and we can just take on the initiative as a local government and just do it. But do you really have the support of the community in terms of moving things forward? So it does take time when you're doing these plans. The first year we did our, just an inventory of all of the sustainable development activities that we've done from local government and some of our nonprofit partners. Secondly, the second year we completed our greenhouse gas inventory. This year we're working on our climate action planning. And so I'm thankful to Indiana University and allowing us to have an extern who was assigned to the city to help us work through that process. And now that Gary has done it, we have other communities who are interested in moving it farther, doing their greenhouse gas inventory in Northwest Indiana. So we're excited that we're not in this alone, but there are other people that are doing it, which will make it easier for us to get the data that we need in order to make sure that our work is a little bit more, a little solid there. In our greenhouse gas inventory, for example, we did not have our transportation data. It was really challenging to get that information. We were on a timeline, but I think other communities will not have to go through those challenges because the South Shore Clean Cities is going to make sure that we have access to that information. But this is our process here. So we are establishing an advisory team. We will set those emission reduction goals, establish a timeline, and then move on to having that advisory committee be responsible for the evaluation and monitoring of the program in alignment with local government. Let's see, the pictures that you see here are just examples of some information that we received, 103 surveys as of September 2020. We are encouraging Gary residents to still take that survey. This information is available for you on our Facebook page. So if you go to City of Gary, Office of Sustainability and Environmental Affairs, you'll find us on social media. Let's see. I think that, and this is a list of some of the projects that we worked on, this climate resilience and sustainability efforts. Hold on. So I'll talk about one that I haven't mentioned yet. In 2016, we were able to work with the U.S. Department of Energy to come up with a clean energy for low-income communities action plan that we are moving forward, and it's centered around renewable energies and energy efficiency activities. So programs like weatherization, healthy homes, neighborhood, community solar are some of the deliverables we would like to see in the City of Gary. We are working with businesses who have sustainability plans or doing corporate social responsibility activities. Just yesterday, Celeste Corporal and I met with a industrial company who was excited about working with us to do a project this year because they have goals to do sustainability activities every year, and it's a in a competitive nature. And so we look forward to working with this organization to support our Climate Youth Summit that we have every year. That is last year that was hosted by the Gary chapter of the NAACP. Oh, I'm so excited about us working with our U.S. Forest Services and our conservation groups who are planting trees in Northwest Indiana. We have why trees are important for improving our air quality and doing green infrastructure in the city of Gary. So we've taken on that charge, and the programs are coming out really well. We just recently removed about 80 ash trees, and now we are moving into working with citizens to identify where should we replant 80 trees, new trees in the city. So I'm wrapping up. I want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to share some information about what's going on. Andrea, I will make sure that I give you links to all of the resources that I have in my presentation, but if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Brenda, thank you so much, and thanks to Marva as well. It's amazing what's going on in Gary, just truly amazing. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and I'll invite either of you to respond. One question is, why is it called environmental justice instead of environmental action or environmental issues? And related to that from the same person is, what is the significance of race in environmental justice? And Marva, I see you smiling and nodding, so I'll turn that one to you.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. So that's why I one of the things I did, especially in my earlier slide, I gave you some history, right? And it's very important to look at the history of things. And in 1987, the United Church of Christ, 1987, United Church of Christ did a commission on racial justice study. So they looked at, and they just looked at the Southeast, wasn't the Midwest, but they just looked at the Southeast, and they looked at where all the hazardous waste facilities were. And the finding was 3 out of 4 of on all those hazardous waste facilities were located predominantly in low income and racial people of color communities. But race was the most significant factor. Race was. Income was second, but race was the most significant factor. And if you do your research, if you continue to do your research, that was in 87. You continue to do it, that comes up every time anyone is doing any type of study. Actually, that study was revisited 20 years later. So recently they had they revisited that study, and people on that study was Paul Mohive, he's at the University of Michigan. Dr. Robert Bullard, you might see him, he's written like 20 books on environmental justice. So there was a lot of the same people in that study, but of course there were students involved, and they found out the same thing. The results were the same thing. 3 out of 4 pollutant facilities were in people of color and low-income communities, with race being the most significant factor. Didn't change in 20 years. And so and of course, President Clinton, when he did his executive order, he did it based on, people of color. Back then they called it minority. People don't call themselves minority anymore, but people of color and poor people. So that's what you'll find in environmental justice. People of color and poor people are the most impacted. But race is still the most significant. And so I suggest, it's all when you get my presentations, just read some of that stuff I mentioned in there, and you'll see for yourself. That's why I always think people need to see for themselves, right? And if you read some of those books, if you read some of those articles, it's still the same. It hasn't changed. Actually, according to my 89-year-old mother, race is worse than it was in her day. So it's still there.
And
Well, I think
I'd like
too-
to add that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. McCabe, I would like to add that in terms of redevelopment and investing dollars into those targeted neighborhoods, it's even more challenging because now we have to go back. So for example, in the Black Oak area where it's really wet over there. So there's a lot of flooding that occurs. There are a lot of homes on septic systems. So those are, they're located not too far from the Little Calumet River. So when you start, we've had support from our congressional supporters, leaders in terms of doing water infrastructure projects in those areas, but it's not enough. So we need to do more investment in those neighborhoods. And how do you get those dollars when you're living in a low-income area? The tax base is not as it is, let's say, for opposite of Miller, who has higher end homes, moderate homes, where you're collecting a greater a dollar from, or your Tolleson neighborhood, small farm neighborhood, where they have a little bit more resources. So it's equally challenging.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I would,
oh.
sorry, Marva, go ahead.
I was going to say, Brenda, you make a good point, because the whole issue around zoning back in the day was a huge issue, because people of color got the worst land to build upon. They got the black bottom land, or land people didn't want, and it was all a result of zoning. And people say, well, they shouldn't live there, but that's the only place they could have lived back then. And so they grew those families there. So a lot of that is the worst land to live in, and then also the cheapest land for industry to buy land and to put those industries in. So all it's a whole history of things there. I'm sorry, Janet, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that the notion of why it's called justice, at least as I understand it, is that the situations that Marva and Brenda have just described are not fair. It is not fair that you are way more likely to live near a hazardous waste site if you are a person of color. And so we need to make sure that environmental burdens are shared justly and equally around the country, and we know that's just not the case. So Jim asked Brenda, are Gary's first responders trained on climate impacts, especially with respect to the vulnerable populations? It's a very interesting angle.
Yeah, we could use an updated response plan, particularly when we're running into issues like a major flood. But our first responders have been trained on things like when the levee may be compromised, or when we are expecting a heavy rainfall, the river is rising, how to respond to that type of exercise. Or the health department has put together a response plan in dealing with a sensitive population of people who still need their medications, or transportation to the hospitals, medical facilities. So not to the level that it's consistent, I would say, but there is some training going on.
Great. So we have another question here for Brenda. Having limited resources, funding, and others, how does Gary navigate the tensions between short-term and long-term impacts, or between coping and adaptation?
Oh, we try to take on the things that we know that we can be successful at, I would say. So with the climate adaptation, it's a little bit easier than mitigation. Mitigation meaning that we have to identify resources in order to resolve that issue. So I would consider our mitigation efforts go into our stormwater improvement or capital improvement projects. That would be an example of one. And then where you have adaptation, we look at our park department in some of the sensitive areas that they have. How can our golf course respond quickly after a severe flooding event? And our stresses are primarily wet weather. associated with wet weather or flooding. But it's which is most critical. And I wish we could get away from thinking about things and just addressing the dire need. And you just have to find those dollars to deal with and start more capital improvement and strategically aligning projects so that we can address issues before they get to the critical point. But that's the best that I can answer that question, because the dollars are limited and you just have to figure it out. But I think that at some point, we're gonna have to figure out how our citizens can really help us to resolve those. And that's why we use community engagement when we're doing planning work.
Yeah. Well, we have gone 1 minute over our promised hard stop at 1. I want to thank everybody who's joined us today. I want to thank those of you that put thoughts into the chat box. I want to thank Andrea for making this run so smoothly, and I especially want to thank Marva King and Brenda Scott Henry for joining us today and for everything that they do. We will look forward to providing you with more information and things to read. Having a reading list curated by Dr. Marva King is a pretty awesome opportunity for all of us. So thanks again, and everybody have a wonderful day, and please do stay safe and well.
Thank you.